Don't blink. There's a potato method that's thousands of years old and it costs nothing. And it's the reason you can get up to 3 times more potatoes without fertilizer. You'll recognize this mistake. Before fertilizer brands existed, people grew potatoes with soil principles, not products. Most gardeners today are stuck buying bags, hoping it works, while food prices keep climbing. You'll want to remember this. But here's the shocking part. It still works today. You think potatoes only grow in one place. Everything starts to make sense until one tiny step turns everything upside down. So if you wanted 3 times more potatoes, what would you do differently? There is an ancient potato cultivation technique that has been used for thousands of years, and using this technique costs you nothing. This method was practiced by civilizations long before fertilizer companies emerged, long before garden centers filled their shelves with expensive synthetic products, and long before anyone tried to convince you that you needed to spend money to grow your own food. However, there is something no one in the commercial agriculture industry wants you to know. This information is still valid today, just as effective as ever. And the only reason most people have never heard of it is that teaching it yields no profit. When you learn to grow potatoes using this ancient method, you stop buying bags of synthetic fertilizer. You'll stop being dependent on garden centers. You'll stop being a customer. And that's precisely why the industries that profit from your dependency have quietly pushed this information aside and deliberately forgotten it. Think about what's happening around you right now. Food prices are rising every month. You feel it immediately when you walk into a supermarket. The weight of rising numbers on every label, every shelf, every receipt. And sometimes the shelves aren't even full. Sometimes you can't find the food you're looking for. This uncertainty is real and growing. But imagine stepping out into your own garden, your own little patch of land, and harvesting potatoes you grew yourself without spending a single dollar on synthetic fertilizer. This freedom is not a fantasy. It's something people have been doing for thousands of years, and it's something you can do right now if you have the right information. What you will learn is not a new invention. These are not things created in a laboratory or developed as a modern gardening trend. They are principles based on the laws of nature, on how the soil actually works when you work with it, not against it. Ancient farmers understood something that modern commercial agriculture has tried very hard to make you forget. When properly understood and respected, the soil contains everything necessary for the potato plant to thrive. Each principle to be addressed builds upon the previous one. Nothing here stands alone. These ideas are deeply interconnected, and once you begin to see how they work together, the entire picture becomes quite clear. This knowledge belongs to you. It has always belonged to those who wish to pay attention to the natural world. What most people fail to realize is how fragile the system that sustains them actually is. Modern industrial agriculture appears impressive on the surface. Vast fields stretching to the horizon, massive machines moving with precision, productivity levels that seem almost impossible by historical standards. However, beneath this impressive exterior lies a structure built on so many deep and numerous dependencies that a disruption in any layer can send shockwaves all the way to your dinner table. Every part of this industrial system depends on something beyond your control. Machines require fuel, and fuel prices are tied to political decisions made in rooms you will never enter. The seeds used in large-scale commercial agriculture are genetically optimized for yield and homogeneity, but they are specifically optimized to perform with synthetic fertilizer inputs. That is, they are essentially useless without the chemical support system for which they were designed. And these synthetic fertilizers require factories to produce them, energy to run those factories, and global supply chains to deliver the final product. If any of these links weakens, the entire chain becomes unreliable. 100 years ago, a farmer had no need for any of these things. A farmer 100 years ago understood the soil beneath his feet in a way that most people today have completely lost. They understood soil principles without needing laboratory analysis to understand what was happening underground. They understood plant biology not from textbooks, but from generations of careful observation and passed down knowledge. They knew how to read growing conditions, how to work with natural cycles, and how to increase soil fertility using what the soil itself provided. These farmers were not primitive, they were highly skilled in methods that modern agriculture has systematically eliminated and replaced with purchased inputs and external dependencies. They didn't need a company to tell them how to grow food because they already knew, and this knowledge made them truly self-sufficient. So why can't most people access this knowledge today? Why wasn't this knowledge passed on through schools, gardening magazines, or agricultural programs that should be educating the next generation of growers? The answer is uncomfortable but simple. Old farming knowledge can't be sold. You can't package an understanding of natural soil biology and put it on store shelves with a price tag. You can't create a subscription service around principles that have existed freely in the natural world for thousands of years. The moment people understand how to grow food without buying synthetic inputs, they cease to be customers. And so this knowledge was quietly removed from mainstream education and replaced with content that steered people toward products, purchase solutions, and a system of dependency that benefits everyone except those trying to grow their own food. This removal was not accidental. It was the inevitable result of profit-driven priorities taking precedence over genuine agricultural education. To truly unlock the potential of a potato plant, you first need to understand what kind of organism you are actually working with. The potato did not originate in the comfortable, well-tilled garden beds of suburban backyards. It comes from the Andes Mountains of South America, one of the most challenging growing environments on the planet. The soil there is thin, rocky, and poor in the nutrients that modern gardeners assume every plant desperately needs. Temperatures fluctuate dramatically, frost arrives with little warning, and drought is a regular part of life at high altitudes. Yet the potato not only survived these conditions, it thrived. Over thousands of years of evolution, it became one of the most resilient food-producing plants cultivated by humankind. A single potato planted in the right conditions has the biological capacity to produce 10, 20, even 30 new potatoes. This is not an exaggeration or a best-case scenario. The most important biological mechanism that most gardeners completely overlook is how potatoes form their tubers. Most people assume that potatoes grow downward from the seed potato and form a new cluster of tubers just below the original planting point. This assumption leads to a planting approach that captures only a fraction of what the plant is capable of producing. The truth is that potato tubers form not only below the original seed potato, but along the entire length of the plant's underground stem. Every section of stem buried below the soil surface becomes a potential site for new tuber development. The plant sends out structures called stolons from its buried sections, and these stolons eventually turn into the potatoes you harvest. This means that the more underground stems there are, the more space the plant has to produce new tubers, and the larger your final harvest will be. Now, let's examine the most common potato planting approach used by most gardeners. They dig a hole 8 to 12 inches deep, place the seed potato inside, cover it, and essentially let the plant do whatever it needs to do on its own. This method ignores nearly everything meaningful about how the potato plant actually functions. It captures the production potential of only a small portion of the stem, while leaving the rest of the plant's biological capacity entirely untapped. This is equivalent to understanding that an engine has 8 cylinders and choosing to run it on only 2. The plant is biologically equipped and ready to produce far more than this method ever allows. Understanding this single principle completely changes your approach to growing potatoes and forms the basis for all other techniques in this process. Now that you understand why the potato plant can produce far more than most gardens allow, it's time to discuss the specific ancient technique that harnesses this biological potential. This is the mounding method, used for thousands of years by potato growers across many continents and cultures. It requires no synthetic fertilizer, special equipment, or any purchased inputs. What is required is an understanding of how the potato plant responds to its environment and a willingness to work with that response in a deliberate and consistent manner throughout the growing season. Start by planting seed potatoes shallow, about 4 to 6 inches deep. When the sprouts reach 6 to 8 inches, mound soil around the stem and leave only a few inches showing. Repeat this hilling process several times as the plant grows. What happens underground during this process is remarkable. Each time you bury a new section of the stem, the plant responds by forming new roots and new tubers. Essentially, you are creating a multi-layered tuber production structure underground. The tubers begin to form at the initial planting depth. Then another layer forms higher up where the first soil cover envelops the new stem, followed by another layer above that, and then another layer on top of that. As a result, potatoes develop at depths of approximately 4 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches, and 16 inches from a single plant without a single application of synthetic fertilizer. The difference this makes in actual harvest results is enormous. Direct comparison tests between a row planted normally and a row grown under the same conditions but properly covered with soil cover yielded striking results. Plants in the standard row yielded an average of 4.5 pounds of potatoes per plant at harvest. Plants in the row covered with soil cover yielded an average of 13 pounds per plant. Nearly 3 times more yield is obtained from the same soil, the same seed potatoes, and the same growing season. This is achieved entirely by working with the plant's natural biology rather than ignoring it. The soil mounding technique alone will transform your potato harvest, but when combined with the second ancient principle, something even more powerful begins to happen beneath your soil. This principle involves feeding your potato plants not with purchased synthetic fertilizer, but with free organic materials that most people discard without a second thought. Straw, dry autumn leaves, and grass clippings are not garden waste. They are some of the most valuable growing inputs available to any gardener, and their lack of cost is precisely why the fertilizer industry has convinced you to ignore them in favor of products that cost you $40 to $50 per bag for decades. When preparing the planting trench, layer straw, dry leaves, and grass clippings at the bottom of the trench. This mixture breaks down at different rates, providing balanced nutrition throughout the season. It's not chemistry that makes the system work, it's the soil biology fed by these organic materials. As these microorganisms break down the organic matter, they release nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and a wide variety of trace elements directly into the soil surrounding your potato plant's root system. The plant receives a continuous, gentle, and perfectly timed source of nutrients that a bag of synthetic fertilizer simply cannot replicate. Synthetic NPK fertilizers work fast, but in a harsh way. They can burn root hairs, weaken the plant, and create fertilizer dependency. The runoff also pollutes water systems, harming soil, plants, and the environment. Meanwhile, last season's straw, last fall's fallen leaves from your trees, and grass clippings from your last mowing session are sitting in a pile waiting to be moved. These materials contain everything your potato plants need to produce an outstanding harvest. They build living soil instead of depleting it. With each passing season, they improve your growing conditions, enhancing them rather than degrading them, and they will never cost you a single dollar. Moisture control is the third key part of this system. Potatoes struggle in soil that swings between too wet and too dry, causing cracks and poor growth. You do not need fancy tools, just good soil structure and smart surface management. When you mix organic matter such as straw, leaves, and grass clippings into heavy clay soil, something remarkable happens to the physical structure of that soil over time. Clay on its own is dense, compacted, and prone to either waterlogging or turning into a hard crust depending on conditions. However, as organic matter breaks down within this clay matrix, it creates a spongy structure filled with small air pockets and channels. This transformed soil retains water without allowing it to stagnate around the roots. It wicks away excess moisture while retaining enough moisture for the plant to use during dry periods. Earthworms, attracted to the abundance of organic matter, constantly move through this improved soil, creating tunnels that become pathways for air and water to circulate all the way down to the deepest root layers, where potato sprouts actively form new tubers. The soil essentially becomes a self-regulating moisture system that requires much less intervention on your part. The soil surface matters, and a thick layer of straw is a powerful tool. About 4 inches of straw blocks sun and wind, keeping the soil cooler and slowing evaporation. With mulch, moisture stays steady, and the plant can focus on growing tubers instead of just surviving. In side-by-side trials, mulched and unmulched beds got the same water. After 4 dry weeks, the mulched bed stayed moist and healthy, while the other dried out and showed stress. Same soil and sun, the only difference was 4 inches of straw on top. Everything about mounding soil and moisture helps boost yield. But this next rule is not about yield. It is about safety. Potato tubers must stay fully covered from light at all times. When a potato is exposed to light, it triggers a natural defense system and starts producing solanine. The green color you see is chlorophyll, and it shows up along with this toxic compound. Green potatoes are not just discolored, they can cause real health issues and are not safe to eat. To protect the tubers from light, ensure there is at least 8 to 12 inches of soil over them throughout the season. Rain and wind can reduce the soil, so be sure to check the rows after weather events. If the tubers start to show, add soil immediately. Even a few days of light triggers solanine formation. In the straw method, you place seed potatoes on the soil surface and cover them with 12 to 16 inches of loose straw. As the plants grow, you keep adding more straw so the tubers stay fully covered and protected from light. At harvest, you simply pull the straw back and collect clean potatoes with no digging and no damage. The most common and costly mistake in potato farming is harvesting too early as soon as the flowers appear. However, flowering does not indicate that the plant is finished. It shows that the process is still in progress. The main tuber development occurs in the last 4 to 6 weeks. Those who harvest early lose a significant portion of their yield. When the leaves turn yellow and the stems bend, most people think the plant is dead, but in fact, the most productive stage begins. The plant transfers all its energy to the tubers. The potatoes swell, harden, and develop a protective skin. Those harvested before this process is complete are smaller and spoil more quickly in storage. Plants harvested early yielded an average of 9 pounds, while those left for 20 more days under the same conditions yielded 13.5 pounds. In other words, simply by being patient and allowing the plant to complete its cycle, a 50% increase in yield was achieved. So, simply by being patient and allowing the plant to complete its cycle, a 50% increase in yield was achieved. No extra fertilizer or techniques are needed. Just allow nature to do its work. Every technique you've learned so far works within a single growing season, but this next principle applies over years and is what transforms a productive garden into a truly self-sustaining system that evolves over time rather than deteriorating. Crop rotation is an ancient practice that farmers intuitively understood long before soil science became an official discipline, and it addresses 3 separate problems simultaneously without requiring a single purchased input. Planting potatoes in the same spot every year exhausts the soil and makes it increasingly difficult to produce healthy crops without chemical intervention. Plants rapidly consume potassium and phosphorus. Moreover, Colorado potato beetles and disease agents accumulate in the same spot, launching direct attacks in the new season. As a result, pests and pathogens multiply, dependence on costly pesticides increases, and the soil's natural balance is disrupted. The solution is a 4 to 5 year rotation cycle that breaks each of these cycles simultaneously. In the first year, you grow your potatoes in a specific bed. In the second year, you plant beans or peas in that bed. Legumes form a partnership with rhizobium bacteria that live in nodules on their roots. And these bacteria fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil in a form that subsequent crops can use. In the third year, cabbage or broccoli occupies that area and benefits from the nitrogen left behind by the legumes. In the fourth year, tomatoes or peppers grow there. Then in the fifth year, after at least a 4-year break, potatoes return to that bed. At this point, insect populations have collapsed, pathogen levels have dropped to negligible levels, and nutrient reserves have had time to recover. After the potato harvest each year, do not leave the soil bare throughout the fall and winter. Immediately plant green manure crops in the cleared bed. Phacelia, mustard, clover, and winter rye are excellent choices that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Their roots penetrate and loosen compacted soil layers, creating channels that improve drainage and aeration. Living mulch protects the soil surface from erosion caused by autumn rains and winter winds. Their root systems bind nutrients that would otherwise be washed away with the rain. When mixed into the soil in early spring, they break down quickly and return a concentrated dose of organic matter just when your next crop needs it most. The price you pay at the supermarket is not just a single label. It is the result of a long chain of dependencies based on transportation, processing, packaging, and synthetic fertilizers. As energy costs rise, fertilizer prices increase. As fertilizer prices increase, production costs and ultimately food prices rise. That quiet anxiety you feel at the checkout is the result of a system you didn't create but pay for every week. Food is power. This is not political. It is a fact proven throughout history. If your food is controlled by others and its price and supply depend on external factors, you are actually a consumer dependent on the system. A small garden is not a hobby, but a conscious step toward the freedom to feed yourself with your own soil. Close your eyes and imagine opening your cellar in the fall. It's cool inside, smells of earth, and there are hundreds of pounds of potatoes you grew yourself sitting in crates. You are not dependent on fertilizer, nor are you thinking about supermarket shelves. The harvest you worked for is there ready. This is not nostalgia, but a sense of security and freedom. Moreover, everything you need to establish this is already at your fingertips. You now have everything you need. 6 principles, each grounded in natural laws, each reinforcing the others, and none requiring you to spend money on synthetic fertilizers, expensive soil conditioners, or commercial growing products. This is a complete system, and before you close this video and go about your day, it's worth taking a moment to hold all 6 principles together in your mind as a unified whole. Plant shallowly and bury the stem by adding soil as it grows. This method significantly increases yield. Mix organic material into the soil and mulch the surface with straw to balance moisture and temperature. Protect the tubers from light so they remain safe and healthy. Be patient, allow the plant to complete its cycle, and practice crop rotation to strengthen the soil. Knowledge is useless unless applied. Waiting for the perfect moment only keeps you stuck in place. There is no perfect moment, only today, and you can start today. The hardest but most important step is always the first step. If this information is important to you, stay tuned. Here, practical and free-range farming knowledge is shared regularly, and each piece builds on the last. If food security and self-sufficiency are on your mind, pass this on to someone who thinks the same way. And if you grow potatoes yourself, share what works, what doesn't, and what you've learned. Every person who chooses independence makes this community stronger.